This episode of Shaun of the South is brought to you by Case Knives, a tradition of my family dating back to my granddaddy, the fisherman, the woodcarver, and the Southern Baptist, who always said the best cure for idle hands is to build something, so keep your hands sharp with a case knife.
Hey, you are listening to Shaun of the South, and I'm your host tonight, Shaun Dietrich, and man, we got a great show lined up ahead of you here tonight, coming to you live at the podcast airwaves and the radio waves all over this fine nation. This nice-looking group of people you see behind me here fixing to play music for you is Bake, Steal, or Borrow, everybody. Bake, Steal, or Borrow.
Well, there's not much to do in this green mountain town, just to fish by the river till the sun goes down. We used to go out to the barn dance on a Saturday night, drink the homemade liquor till the feeling was right. So won't you take a turn with me, my sweet little Liza Jane, and we'll drown out all of this heartache, and we'll dance and sing around to that cross-tuned fiddle and old Mount Time. And I've been working in a log camp all winter long, eating food from a can around an old tin stove. I'm gonna get off of this mountain when my big check comes. Go to town, my old lady, and we'll stay out till dawn. So won't you take a turn with me, my sweet little Liza Jane, and we'll drown out all of this heartache, and we'll dance and sing around to a claw-hammered banjo in old in old man town.
This portion of our program is brought to you by visitnorthalabama.org, the Mountain Lakes Tourist Association. Visit the 16 North Alabama counties and make this state what it is. Let's talk barbecue here for just a minute. Now, you can visit the Mud Creek Restaurant in Hollywood, Alabama, off County Road 213, and you can get the tenderest pork you ever had. Or how about New Market Barbecue in New Market, Alabama, off Winchester Road? When you visit, tell them Sean sent you. And watch their eyes go blank when they answer who in the Sam Hill is Sean. And if you're sick and tired of having low cholesterol, get to Florence, Alabama, and visit Smokin' on the Boulevard restaurant. You can taste dry rubbed meat, slow smoked over hickory coals. It will change your life, bless your heart, and make a believer out of you. So go visit the North Alabama Barbecue Trail today, because whatever you do, you can do it better in North Alabama. So visit northalabama.org or hashtag VisitNorthAL. Now let's have another tune here from Bake, Steal, or Borrow, everybody. Bake, Steal, or Borrow. to read you a little bit of our mail today, a little bit of our mail sent in to us from listeners all over the U.S. who had nothing better to do than to put pen to paper or type out an email, or God forbid, get their smartphone out and type it with their thumbs, and send us a message telling us either something about their life or asking us with legal representation to cease and desist. Cease and desist. We get a lot of those. Our first letter's from Michelle Wesley, Detroit, Michigan. How weird is it, Sean, that in the age of technology, it's the old things that are really getting back into my life. Your show feels like old radio to me, and my daughter, Amelia, and I feel like we are sort of sitting outside listening to a radio show on our porch instead of where we actually are, which is in Bloomfield Township, in a neighborhood that is not the country at all. But your show gets my imagination going, and I feel like it is. So, from the Yankee up north, just wanted to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. Oh, and by the way, we're Methodists, just in case you wondered. Well, dear Michelle, now I can sleep soundly tonight. I was wondering what denomination you were up there in Detroit. Derek Simpson, Hoover, Alabama. Do you ever wake up and feel tired before your day even gets started, Sean? I do. And sometimes it's a struggle just to get breakfast in my stomach and out the door in time for work. Anyway, I just wanted to tell you and your listeners that I have discovered B12 works super good. Man, I have more energy than I ever thought possible. So I'm telling everybody I know about B12. I'm saying take it and it will change your life, dude. It will change your life. If you feel like I did, get the kind that mixes with water, because the other kinds don't work at all for me. So I like your show. I listen to it on the way to work every Monday. Your friend, Derek. Enjoy the B12. Dear Derek, thank you for the public service announcement. I have to be honest, I was worried there for a moment you were going to try to sell me a water filtration device. I've had bad experiences with water filter salesmen. Sharice Lindale, New Orleans, Louisiana. I had a funny thing happen to me today when we were going out to dinner, my husband and I. We saw someone famous who I won't tell you who it was because that's not the point. The point is we actually ran into this famous person, and I was shaking when I saw him, and I thought, what do I say? And my husband had no idea who this movie star was. He was all like, hey, so how do you know Sharice again? Do you work with her or something? And I just wanted to die, Sean. And he, the movie star, played it cool. And I think he was actually relieved that my husband didn't know him from Adam's uncle. To make a long story short, my husband asked if he and his wife wanted to go out with us for a drink. I was mortified. But this movie star actually said, okay. I couldn't believe it. We hung out with someone who is super famous for a few hours, and my husband bought his drinks, even though this guy has probably more money than the Lord. My husband had no idea who he was with. And when we got home, I didn't want to tell my husband because I didn't want him to feel silly in front of me because he is just that much of a nice guy. He doesn't know a stranger, and I love him so much. I had to tell someone about this since I can't even tell my husband about it. So you are the person I have chosen to tell. Your friend, Sharice. Dear Sharice, I don't even know what to say. All I could say is hold that husband of yours very, very tightly, because it sounds like he could make friends with a water hydrant. Brianna from Lubbock, Texas. My husband and I sleep with a sound machine. And when our sound machine gave up the ghost, we started using our cell phones and an app that is a sound machine. But my app and his app are not the same apps. So he uses one on his bedside, and I use one on mine. The two go at the same time, and when they go together, something in the sound frequencies clashes, and it sounds like somebody is repeatedly saying, Jiminy Christmas, Jiminy Christmas, Jiminy Christmas, over and over again. And we woke up hearing it together. My husband and I can listen and both hear Jiminy Christmas, Jiminy Christmas. So we broke down and bought a new sound machine at Bed Bath & Beyond. But it also had something in the sine waves. Get ready for this. It sounded like someone was humming. Believe it or not, I'm walking on air. And we both heard it. And finally, my husband and I returned it, went back to the store, and bought 2 big box fans. And the sounds of the fans together are so loud you can't hear nothing, let alone your own thoughts. And we can finally sleep again. Funny story, I guess. You can use it on your podcast if you want. Love, Brianna. Dear Brianna in Lubbock, Texas, I think you get the award today for funniest story. Mary Stepnowski, Decatur, Georgia. I'm a flight attendant, and I spend a lot of time in airports, as you can imagine. And I listen to your podcast, and it kind of grounds me, no pun intended. It brings me back home to the South, especially when I'm in a foreign place. You might not believe that, but I have listened to your podcast in Germany, the Czech Republic, Belgium, France, Australia, and even Alaska. I wanted you to know that you have made it all over the world with this country girl. Thank you for that. Thank you very much from a friend of yours way up in the air probably right now, Mary Stepnowski. Dear Mary, here's to you and flying to friendly skies. Thanks for the letter. Scott Thomas, Ottawa, Kansas. My dad used to run a tractor every day of the season. He would be on that thing chewing something, spitting a little bit into a Coca-Cola bottle while he drove with his knees. I used to ride on his knees sometimes, and it was hard for him to drive. So he would let me steer while he chewed and spit. We had a good life, my dad made sure of that. He worked harder than anybody I ever knew, and he changed careers 3 times in his life, but always drove that tractor and made money on the side with our land because he was a farmer's farmer, and farmers know how to make do, especially when the world is not being very kind to them financially. He grew up during the Depression, and he knew times that were so hard that when he told them to us in story form, we almost didn't believe he'd gone through them. We thought it was one of those walk to school up hills both ways through the snow kind of stories. But now I know that he was a man who really had learned to survive the worst life could dish out. We lost my daddy last week, and I've been sitting on his old tractor out in his barn a lot, not running it, just trying to remember him and recapture what he was in my mind. He had a good life, and I'm not sad about his life because he never missed a day of living. I miss him so badly that I'm just using you as a vehicle to write about him because it feels good to write about him. Maybe one day, I'm thinking, I will write a biography about him because my dad, Charles, was an amazing man. Thank you for telling your listeners about an average man from Ottawa, Kansas, your buddy Scott. Dear Scott, thank you for telling us about your father. And may his roads in the sky be ever straight. And may the crops he raises up yonder be ever golden and plentiful, because the things he produced here on earth were beautiful indeed. You should know, you are one of those things. That's letters from our listeners. Letters from our listeners. Gonna have another tune here tonight from Bake, Steal, or Borrow, everybody. Bake, Steal, or Borrow. Well, it has been rainy in northwest Florida, rainy in northwest Florida Panhandle and around South Alabama. It has been so wet that someone like me with curly hair who walks out of doors looks like we have licked a light socket. That's because our hair starts to get into these tight little curls, just like we were the love child of Bozo the Clown and Eleanor Roosevelt. It's a rough way to live, having red curly hair and freckles. Freckles that look like buckshot, they have buck teeth, and two ears that look like you're driving down the road in a taxi cab with both doors open. It's hard. When humid weather strikes, it gets so humid that your hair betrays you, and it gives you an air of almost a clown-like appearance. It's not fun, but that's what happens when it rains. My wife was making soup while I sat on the porch. I got onto the porch because my dogs had started wrestling. See, dogs get cooped up during the wet weather. My dogs had started a WWF league in the living room. They just had a smackdown right there. I mean, my bloodhound jumped on top of Otis, who's our alleged Labrador. Jumped right on top and tackled him. Next thing you know, Otis is on the bottom, Otis is on the top, Delmaloo's on the top, Delmaloo's on the bottom, and round and round it goes. It got so hairy inside that I had to go out onto the porch for some peace and some quiet. But that's all right. I love to listen to the rain. I come from people, country people, who love to listen to the rain. Ain't nothing better than a good rainstorm. And my wife put on some chicken soup onto the stove because there ain't nothing better than chicken soup during a rainstorm. Soup and rain go together. For small town people like us, soup and rain, they're hand in hand, almost the same way that soup and cold weather go together, or gumbo and Mardi Gras go together, or the same way that Baptists and sobriety go together. It's the marriage of two wonderful things. And I could sit on that porch and I smelled this wonderful soup cooking. There's nothing like the smell of onions and garlic and celery and carrots and chicken inside a big old Dutch oven, boiling, simmering. It had been raining all day, and so my wife had been cooking soup since breakfast time because, in her own words, my wife is a graduate of well, it used to be called Faulkner State University in Bay Minette, and she was a culinary graduate. And one of her coup de grace things to make was soup. You see, soup is not easy to make, contrary to popular belief. You do it wrong and it comes out looking like an ugly pot of mud. You do it right, and it's every ingredient inside that vat of soup retains its identity, and you can taste it, but it also melds together into a lovely, lovely amalgamation of flavors that tickle and tantalize your taste buds. My wife has a phrase that she said when she was putting the soup on in that Dutch oven, starting at breakfast time. She said, "I got to put it on early because the longer soup simmers, the better it gets." She said, "Time equals flavor. Time equals flavor." Now, I made a note of this because I am a writer. And writers have to generally make notes because if we don't, we will forget them. I've had several wonderful stories in my life that I wanted to tell. I mean, groundbreaking stories from people I've met who had incredible, tales of heroism that would have just been published and made me a lot of money. But I did not write them down. And so this is why I host a podcast for a living. I had to write it down on my little yellow legal pad. Time equals flavor. I love that. That's pretty good. You can learn a lot from chefs and from bakers because they deal with uncertain ingredients and try to make something beautiful that is not just beautiful by an educated person's standards, but beautiful by the lay person's standards, because everybody's got to eat. That's enough about soup. I went out to the porch and I sat there with my little yellow legal pad and I listened to that rain fall. It's like a collection of white noise. And in our part of the world, whenever it rains out here in the sticks, you hear frogs. Frogs, they rise and swell in choruses like a choir. It's not a ribbit like you hear. It's a wow, wow, wow. When they just rise and swell, it's a wonderful sound. I could die listening to frogs. We live in a frog's mating ground. I'm serious. This is true. They filmed a famous movie down here in my area in Northwest Florida, right here in the woods, about, 4 miles up the road from me. And the movie was a horror movie, and it was called Frogs. Because we have more frogs per square inch than they had back in old-time Egypt when God was putting his plagues on the Pharaoh. Oh, yes, we got frogs, and they will come out and sing during a rainstorm. You can hear them. You can also smell things in a rainstorm that you wouldn't normally smell. You can smell wet earth. Oh, there ain't nothing better than the smell of wet earth. Just imagine 1,000,000 acres of long-leaf pine trees saturated from the pure water heaven. It smells about as good as it sounds, fresh and alive. It's a good atmosphere for a rider, as long as he doesn't get interrupted by the sound of 2 dogs indoors who are having a UFC fighting championship, which my dogs were. I could look through the window and I could see them just rolling, tossing, barking, growling. And I thank God I was out on the porch. It's about the only time you can sit on the porch is during a rainstorm, because the flies, they all find themselves holed up in a little stump or a little hollow log. They won't even come out during the rain. Because our whole world out here in the woods, it gets slow and lethargic. It ain't that way everywhere. About a week ago, I was in New York City. Now, I've only been to New York City twice in my entire life. The first time I ever went to New York City, I was with my choir director, Brother Bob. Our church choir went. We were in New York City, and we got up to Times Square, where they got this big group of people at a crosswalk waiting for that little red hand on the traffic signal to turn to the blue walking man. And when that blue walking man turned blue, that crowd of people started walking toward us, and our crowd of people started walking toward them, until both crowds of people mixed together. And it was like the children of Israel wandering through the desert for 40 years. And I started to get panicky and sweaty. I started to feel my forehead break out. I started to feel cold drops run down my cheeks, and I knelt down right there in the crosswalk in Times Square. And Bob came up to me and said, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" I said, I don't know, but I'm sick to my stomach. Brother Bob took me to an urgent care center right there downtown. We sat in a big old waiting room where people were making sounds like, It was enough to turn your stomach again. He walked up to this bulletproof glass cashier's reception counter, and the woman behind the counter looked like Aunt Bee, except she had a snake tattoo crawling up her neck and rolling around her jaw, and that snake crawled right around her ear and stuck his tongue in one side, and his tongue came out the other side. She admitted me, and that doctor looked at me. He said, "Son, you're having a panic attack." That's what it is, a panic attack. And the guy had his little script, and he wrote something down on it, and handed it to me, and it said, "Get out of New York City." I'd never come back, is what the final script said, except I did not heed his advice. I went back to New York City. I had to do something for a book. And I was in New York City, and it rained. The rain was falling from heaven like big old sheets. It was just falling and saturating the street and turning into a mirror. You could see red and green and orange lights reflecting from the puddles on the black pavement. And it did not faze that city. Taxis still drove downtown going at 150 miles an hour with their arms extended out the windows and a special finger extended to those who have offended them. And people were rushing from point A to point B, and horns kept honking, and people kept yelling, and the police sirens kept going. It didn't touch the city. Rain doesn't touch New York City. It just is a little bit of an inconvenience. But here in the country, In a country, a good rain will turn the world to a dead stop. And everything ends. Even the insects hold themselves up, and the house cats, and the feral cats, and the feral dogs, they all lay down on somebody's porch. And people will just stop and listen to a good rainstorm. And so it was for a little while. I was out on that porch, just sitting there with my little yellow legal pad, trying to figure out how I was going to use this phrase in a column I was writing. Time equals flavor. But the rain had made me too lazy. And the sounds of the world, like music, had made me just numb. And I wasn't interested in working. I grew up a lazy boy. I believe laziness to be a talent that you have to learn during your boyhood, and I was lazy. And so while I was on the porch, I had this little book that was given to me by a buddy. It was Minnie Pearl's Book of Jokes. Now, it ain't exactly highbrow literature. I mean, when people hear that you're a writer, they expect you to be interested in reading highbrow things. Like, they want to hear that you read Moby Dick, and they want you to say things like, it wasn't that hard, it was easy, I enjoyed it. But that would be a lie. I got past the first few paragraphs of Moby Dick, I shut it, and I thought to myself, I would rather read a joke book than this right here. Minnie Pearl had some great jokes. Great jokes. And while I smelt that wonderful aroma of chicken soup cooking and coming through the windows that my wife was making, I read through the jokes. One of them jokes went like this. Teacher, she was at school. She got up before her blackboard and she turned around and she wrote a sentence onto the blackboard, and that sentence was, I ain't had fun all weekend. And she turned back to her class and she said, Class, how can I correct this sentence? And the boy in the back stood up and he said, Teacher, you could always get yourself a boyfriend. They don't make them like Minnie Pearl anymore. They don't make them like Minnie Pearl. My father loved Minnie Pearl. That chicken soup was wafting through the cracks in the windows and the door jamb. My wife bought that chicken from a friend of ours. Well, he's kind of a friend. He lives north of the county. He's kind of a hippie man named Mr. Lonnie, an older man. When he talks, he uses the word man a lot after every sentence. Hey, man. He's a hippie. He's a hippie. And because he's a hippie, he names all his chickens and his birds and his animals, his goats, his pigs, and all that. He names them. And this particular bird that we bought was named Daisy. Daisy. And my wife loves this sort of thing. She loves organic food because she was a culinary master, a culinary trained chef. And she loves to know things about her chickens and her goats and her pigs. Not that we eat goats, but, well, I'm not ruling it out. I mean, she loves to know that these chickens had a good life. And if possible, she loves to know that they had a good Christian name. So Lonnie always tells us the bird's name before he sells us the bird. Once he tried to sell us a frozen turkey that was named Mary. But my wife refused it because her mother's name is Mary. Wouldn't have felt right having Mary over for supper in that regard. I hear my wife talking on the phone. I can hear her while I'm out there writing. I'm writing on my little yellow legal pad, trying to come up with something. Writing a column is work. People think that it's not work, but it is work. You have to force yourself to bring sentences together in a cohesive form, and then you have to find something at the end. There's nothing like a good, short, solid punchline at the end of your story. That's how you tie it all together in a nice little red bow. And that takes a lot of mind work. And so while I was out there writing, I was interrupted by the sound of my wife's voice. She was on the phone talking to somebody. And the more I listened, the more I eavesdropped, the more I realized she was involved in some juicy gossip. You can always tell when she's talking gossip because the tone of her voice changes a little bit. It gets very quiet, as though someone's going to hear her. Which, of course, ain't nobody around but two fighting dogs and me. Well, I can't tell you what she was gossiping about, but I can tell you another Minnie Pearl joke, and I will gladly do so if you please. There was a little baby in the nursery at the hospital, 2 little babies. And they were together. The boy baby looks at a girl baby. He says, "Hey, sweetheart, I just discovered that I'm a boy baby. Would you like to know how I figured out I'm a boy baby?" She looked at him. She said, "Sure, how?" He said, "Well, wait till the nurse leaves and I'll tell you." And the nurse left. He stood up. He raised up his nightgown. And he said, "See, blue booties on my feet." I'm going to get in a lot of trouble for that one. Well, it was about 5 o'clock, and I just sat out there in that porch listening to that rain come down by the metric ton, and I still hadn't figured out exactly how I was going to work in that phrase that my wife had said. And pretty soon my wife had called me. She said, "Sean, soup's on. Soup's on." I got excited because I was getting real hungry. And I could smell that soup. I could practically taste it. I stood up and I started to go inside, and I looked back at my little yellow legal pad, and I saw a bunch of phrases which I had written down, which had absolutely no connection to one another. They were all underlined and circled, and then little doodles on the page and little pictures. And one little phrase said, "God bless Minnie Pearl." Another phrase said, was my wife's phrase. And I thought about this. I thought, Lord, I'm never going to get this column written. There's no way it's going to happen. It's not going to come together. I mean, I suppose I could write a little something and tack that little sentence onto the end of the column and just hope that it means as much to the people who read it as it does to me, and hope they catch the deeper meaning, because after all, it is true. It is true. Life presents a whole lot of different things to you in the form of ingredients, but we don't know the ingredients when they're hitting us. They come in the forms of triumphs and failures and victories and bad grades and good grades and good times and sad times and heartache and loss and suffering and joy and laughter and love and new births and new people in your family and mothers-in-laws and the passing of pets who you thought would be with you forever, and the passing of important people who you thought you would love forever. Life offers you these different ingredients, and they all fall together into the container that is your life. And they don't seem to make a whole lot of sense. They seem to be a whole collection of randomized events that just don't seem to have any cohesive structure to them. But if you give them time, if you give them just a little bit of time to simmer on the stove in a big old Dutch oven on low heat, if you give it time, you'll find that your life is not without meaning, and that every little thing that's ever happened to you is not without significance, and that perhaps the meaning of your life is to give your life meaning. Perhaps these beautiful, beautiful events and these tragic events swirl together and impart their flavor to who you are. They make you into you, just like they've made me into me, our experiences. Because after all, time equals flavor. Hey, thank you very much for having me this evening. Thank you very much for having me. It's been a wonderful pleasure. Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for listening to Sean of the South. I've been your host today, Sean Dietrich, and man, it's been a bona fide pleasure, if I do say so myself. This episode was brought to you by Case Knives, a tradition of my family dating back to my granddaddy, who once said the best way to cure idle hands is to build something. So keep your hands sharp with a Case knife. And by Folklore Brewing Company, quite literally the best brew in Alabama. Look them up today at folklorebrewingandmeadery.com. The music you heard behind me today was Beg, Steal, or Borrow, formed in early 2013 with a mission to resurrect real bluegrass music. They have since grown into a solid repertoire of original material, winning 3 prestigious bluegrass band competitions in Maine, Connecticut, and New York, and that ain't easy. The group is heading out in 2019 do a concert season, and they were releasing their first full-length album with original tunes titled Old Mountain Time. Look them up online at Beg, Steal, or Borrow, VT.com, VT as in Vermont, and download their music today. To find anything more about what I do, you can visit SeanOfTheSouthShow.com, and there you can find archived episodes dating back to our very first episode to this episode, which you just heard. And while you're there, I hope you take the time to drop me a line to me about your birthday announcements, wedding invitations, and potluck socials, and I do my best to read them over the air for my friends, because I love to do that sort of stuff for my friends. And speaking of friends, I've always liked Superman more than I like Batman, Spider-Man, or Iron Man, probably because Superman wore his underpants outside his regular pants, and that takes bravery. Adios.
Creek so muddy and the pond's all dry. Creek so muddy and the pond's all dry. Creek so muddy and the pond's all dry. Creek so muddy and the